Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are going to be going over the finished build showcase for the Mirror Arrow, Blink Arrow, Bombarding Clones Necromancer. So, this was my League starter. I got most of my Atlas completion done, all 4 of my Watchstones completed, and I've also gotten most of my favorite slots with this build, just from fresh start all the way to the end. Now, it was a very smooth ride the entire time, and I'm going to be shelving the build for the future. Why is that? Well, I feel like as though as a league starter, I'm pretty happy with the build's performance. It's done every single thing I've ever wanted to do, and I could invest more currency into the build, but I really do want to try the next build as there's some really spicy things in the future. So the biggest idea here with Blink Arrow Mirror Arrow, if you don't know what's going on, we are building around mainly Blink Arrow of Bombarding Clones. This is all of our clear. We did not have this before in the last few patches because it didn't exist, and this allows your Blink Arrow to shoot rain of arrows. This has a very large coverage, and it also has very large amounts of damage potential thanks to the fact that it has really good synergy with fresh meat. Since Blink Arrow's duration is so long with the Bombarding Clones version, we can actually get to like a 6.6-second duration base for Awakened Fury, which not only gives you adrenaline, which is a lot of attack speed and damage, it also gives us the 4% base crit and the 60% crit multi, meaning that our Bama is actually pretty close to capping on our crit. It's like about, I think, like 50-60% crit already with this. I'm not entirely sure exactly, but yeah, it is a lot of crit, and it allows our rain of arrows to compete with our normal mirror arrows, which are just on a 5 link currently. Now, of course, this is great and all, but what else do we do? We also utilize a unique called Ancient Skull, which gives us a lot of crit chance for our minions, and it also makes it so our minions hear whispers when they deal critical strike. This gives us a lot of increased attack speed, increased damage as well, and it also helps us get more crit for our fresh meated Blink Arrow of Bombarding Clones. For other things we do for damage, we also grab something like a Replica Stampede. Now, early on, this is really strong as it gives us a lot of more damage for free on a 4 link, and it also allows us to anoint another thing. But later on, you do want to eventually get rid of it and go for 2 6 links instead once you have the currency for it, as the movement speed being nailed to 150% of its base value is great now early on, but later on, when you want to zoom, you definitely want to get rid of this. Although this build doesn't really feel that downside as much because you're just blinking through everything anyways, so it's not really too big of a deal, it's just a little annoying. Other things that we do to scale the damage, we just grab rings like these, which give us a lot of increased attack and cast speed as well for our minions. Remember, all of our attack speed that we get on our tree also applies to us thanks to Spiritual Command, which allows us to attack with our Blink Arrow Mirror Arrow faster. Otherwise, this build would be insanely sluggish to play. I also managed to craft a really cheap attack and cast speed cluster jewel for about like 3 divs using some bound fossils on an I-84 large cluster jewel with 11 slots. I got it for very cheap, which allowed me to, push the damage even further as well. And other things for damage are bow. So there's a few things you can do with the bow specifically. You can make it so that you fracture either lightning, fire, or cold, and then you want another element at tier 2 or higher, while also spamming the essences of fear, deafening essences of fear, and then eventually you want crit, crit multi, attack speed on the suffixes, and that's essentially how you're going to craft your bow. Now, it doesn't matter which LE types you get, because of the way that the build works currently, we're utilizing our elemental equilibrium for, of course, a large amount of exposure against enemies, which gives us a very large amount of negative res for enemies, which is really strong. And that means that we need to do 2 types of elemental damage and make sure we don't deal a 3rd type. So for instance, if we have fire and lightning on our bow, we want to use Eye of Winter in our Arcanist brand link to apply the exposure with elemental equilibrium. If it's lightning and cold, like my current bow is, we actually want to put in Purifying Flame in the Arcanist brand to apply fire damage, to apply those exposures for us as well. And we also want to make sure we're either running a Wrath if we're running Lightning Cold, or we're running an Anger if we're running Anger Fire Lightning. Now, so far, I've noticed that Cold is much better for this specific build. You want like Cold and Lightning, mainly because of the fact that you actually get free shatters because you're critting with Bama, which is great. That gives you a lot of defensive capabilities as well. Now, another thing as well, you need to make sure that you're putting your DPS aura on your Divine Blessing. You need to make sure that it is on a Generosity, as otherwise it will apply to your spells that you're casting with your Arcanist brand, which will then, of course, fuck up your Elemental Equilibrium. Now, for defenses, what are we doing for defenses? I actually never cap my spell suppress on this build. I only use the spell suppress as lucky, and I'm about at, where is it here? Like 80% spell suppress or something like that. You could fill out the rest of it with either charms, or you could just use better gear than me. You could eventually craft a much better chest than the Cloak of Flame that I'm running, which I'm using for the fizz damage taken as fire to reduce physical damage, right? But right now I'm close to suppress camp, and we could fix that by getting just a little bit more, right? Now, of course, we're building a little bit of evasion with grace and stuff like that, which makes it so we take less hits, of course, which is great. Other things for defenses, we're running a little bit of recoup thanks to the recoup wheel by Witch. This is insane. Whenever we're playing an evasion build, taking less damage thanks to the recoup is great. And this also gets affected by the recovery rate on Bone Barrier as well, which is also a lot of physical damage reduction, and gives us a version of Sealskin that doesn't have to be in our sockets, because as you can tell, if you look at my build, I have a lot of sockets that are filled up and it sucks. Now, that's the basics of the build. Those are just the more hallmarks of it. I could go into more detail all day, but I'll be honest, I don't think anyone wants to hear that. They just want to go down and steal the POB, which is completely fine. Now, what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to take the time and start talking about some frequently asked questions with the build, things that people ask constantly. So the first thing, the thing that I see the most is, how am I getting power charges for my minions? Well, I am not getting power charges for my minions. Now, the reason why people think this is because of Ancient Skull. Now, the way Ancient Skull works is you just need to have power charges allocated. You do not need to give your minions power charges to get the crit chance on this. You just simply need to have power charges allocated. So since we have 4 power charges allocated, we're getting 200% increased crit chance for our minions, right? So we don't have to have power charges for our minions, although that would be great later, but I'm not investing into anything like that. Okay? We're good here? All right. Now, another frequently asked question, why are we not playing Guardian? Well, the biggest problem with Guardian versus Necromancer is the lack of 60% increased skill, well, 50% increased skill effect duration that we get from Necromancer. This not only scales the amount of time that our blink arrows can be up with the adrenaline buff thanks to fresh meat, it also scales our divine blessing. It also scales the max amount of normal mirror arrows that we can get, which is a more damage multiplier to our damage, of course. So there's a lot of reasons to play Necromancer. Also, as well, the node Unwavering Faith is only 5% recovery rate per aura, while Bone Barrier is 20% recovery, which is almost half, while also having additional physical damage reduction, while also giving us the bone armor scale, which saves us a socket. So this is much better than everything Guardian has access for us. So Guardian's really good early on because you can get stuff like Radiant Crusade and all of that. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, Dread, why aren't the elemental relics in your build? Why wouldn't you play Guardian with the elemental relics? You can do that, but the biggest problem that you're going to face when you do that is you're going to have to not rely upon elemental equilibrium, because sure, you're going to get like the triple relics and all that, but the damage isn't going to be that high because, you want to be focusing on 2 different elements, not all 3. So the last relic, i.e. usually the hatred relic, is going to be a wasted point. But It is still a decent amount of damage, but it's definitely not worth losing Necromancer over because we get stuff like Mindless Aggression, we get Res Cap thanks to Commander of Darkness, and all of that combined makes just Necromancer a superior play in my humble opinion. Now, of course, if you want to play Guardian, go right ahead. Another question that I commonly get is, can you play this as poison? Yes, you can play this as poison. If you get a Covenant, a 6-link Covenant, and put your Blink Arrow of Rain of Arrows inside your Covenant, and then of course get your chance to poison to cap, use like Abyssal Sockets, of course use the Amanamu's Gaze, you can play this as poison, but at that point we end up being a worse version of Poison SRS, and the beautiful thing about this build versus Poison SRS is a lot of our gear is cheap. Our Ancient Skull is cheap. It's like 1C. Replica Stampede is like 15C. Our Cloak of Flame is like 2C. None of the items that I currently have are necessarily that expensive. It's just everything combined is a little bit like about like 10 div, which is not really that high in all reality. Most of my currency went from recrafting my bow, which was like I think like a div or something like that to craft. Yeah, I was like a 2 div to craft. Our cluster jewel, which was about 3 div to craft as well, and all like it wasn't actually that much currency, and I'm pretty happy with the build overall. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread. No detailed explanation this time. If you like the video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm off to go work on something else. Bye.